All right. Hey there, all you cool cats and kittens. We are back again with our recent or our more recent installment of the Religion PowerPoint via Screencastify. We are today talking about the Eastern religions. That's going to be Hinduism, Buddhism, and then Confucianism and Taoism. What we're doing at this point is getting into the seven major religions. So everything up until this time has been the historical progression that we've taken as humans with our understanding of spirituality, and so we did the history, went back, approximately 300,000 years ago, and kind of worked our way up to approximately 6,000 years ago. And now we're going to cover what happened with the core religions and how they gave birth to some of the newer faiths that are more in the neighborhood of 2,000 years old or so, and how all that kind of came into being. And a lot of that was done with this last screencastify that I gave you guys, where we talked about kind of the progression in the history. But now we're going to talk about the actual religions and how they kind of manifested themselves over time, and how they changed over time. So you have two cores. You have Hinduism and you have Judaism. Hinduism is the old core faith of the East, and most of what happened came from Hinduism, or understandings of Hindu faith, and splintered off, or uh, kind of became their own from that. And then you have Judaism, that is the core faith in the West. And of course, that gave birth to a number of different religions, that we kind of call our Western religions today. Today's lesson is about the East, and it's about Eastern religion, the four: Hinduism, Buddhism, Confucianism, and Taoism. All right. That's a good time for me to say, too. Clearly, I have not been a member of the Hindu faith, or any of the Eastern faiths. And it presents me with a unique challenge to try and explain how people understand and think, having not actually lived in that area, or believe these things for myself. And that's a real challenge. Uh, if we go back to William James and personal religion, right? What he said was that everybody has their own understanding of religion and their own understanding of faith, and it's religion is not something that is group in nature. It's something that's individual in nature, and we all think differently. And so, for me to try and explain to you how a billion people understand their faith, their Hindu faith, is a very difficult thing to do. I would imagine that there's a lot of people that would watch this that are Hindu that would go, well, no, that's not what I believe, or no, that's not what I think, or something along those lines. And of course, people are different. It'd be the same with Christianity. If you explained how you understand your version of Christianity, another Christian may go, well, that's not what I think, or that's not what I believe, or, I don't think that's right. So keep that in mind. I'm going to do the best that I can to have you understand from a broad view perspective what Hinduism is and what it's all about. But the best way for you to really understand this is to live it for yourself, or to read a book, or watch a video, or talk to somebody who's Hindu that can explain to you their understanding of it. And that will give you a little better look at it. What I'm going to do is draw from my experiences, what I've read, what I've watched, and Hindus that I've had conversations with. And I'm going to draw from all of that to do the best that I can to explain to you the Hindu faith. Okay. And I should say, too, I was lucky enough to have a friend that was Hindu, that was a doctor in the area. And some years ago, I was able to get her to come in and speak to my human geography classes. And she gave a great presentation and took questions and answers. And a lot of what I say now and I talk about now will be from that presentation that she gave. So keep that in mind. This is her version of Hinduism, and or a lot of what I'm going to talk about is kind of her understanding of what Hinduism is, because that's my experience, and so I'm going to share that with you, along with what I've read and studied, and other things. Okay, so here's what's really cool and unique about Hinduism, and this again goes right back to this presentation that this lady gave. It's a faith that does not have a creator, It doesn't have an origin. We know that it absolutely was being practiced in the Indus River Valley 4,000 years ago. So we have record of that because that's when the Vedas, if you look down here, that's when the Vedas were created. So we know that people in the Indus River Valley 4,000 years ago started writing down some things that were Hindu. But we don't really know who came up with the idea of Hinduism, and we don't know when it started. Historians will argue that it didn't start, that it evolved, kind of the way that Judaism evolved over tens of thousands of years in the Tigris Euphrates area of Europe. We would say that Hinduism evolved probably over the course of tens of thousands of years in the Indus River Valley area. And as of 4,000 years ago, we have record of it. So we say that it's at least 4,000 years old, but we have no idea how long people were actually doing these things. And the reality is, it was probably 30 or 40,000 years ago. People were practicing, um, uh, we'll say, an early form of Hinduism. So that's a pretty neat thing about the religion, that there is no creator. There's no Jesus. There's no Buddha. There's no Muhammad. There's nobody that you can point to and say, this is the original, this is the creator, that kind of thing. And it probably is something that evolved from animistic faith into what it is now. And as I said in the last video from yesterday, yeah, there's a pretty strong connection between Hinduism and traditional belief. You can see that. And as I talk here for the next 10 minutes or so about Hinduism, I hope you can make some of those connections and see this. Okay, so I'm going to jump around the slide here. I'm not necessarily going to go in order. So we already talked about the sacred text. The sacred site is the Ganges River. That's actually the cover of the textbook that we used this year. One of the really sad things is the pollution in India is so bad. Going back to our environment chapter, it is so bad. The Ganges River now is just full of garbage. It looks like a floating garbage dump, and it's part of the faith, it's part of the tradition to make a pilgrimage to the Ganges River and to bathe. And the word bathe basically means swim in this tradition, and say prayers. So you get into the water, you pour the water over your head, you dunk your head in the water, and then you say certain prayers. And unfortunately, as you watch people do this now, they're like pushing the garbage out of the way to get into the river. And there's a picture right on the front of our textbook. There's a picture of this happening. So you want to talk about, the individualism and the global coming together, the two parts of this course, right? Here's the global with the environmental concerns and the waste, human waste, and that piece of the environment connecting to the individual that's trying to partake in this sacred pilgrimage and do their prayers in the Ganges River. So yeah, the unfortunate reality here is that India is environmentally it's a mess, and particularly with waste. The CO2 emissions in India is not as bad as it is in other places, but the garbage problem in India is huge, and that affects some of their sacred practices. Okay, so let's jump. There's your kind of sacred text and Ganges River. Let me jump here. Not centrally located, lacks bureaucratic structure. That's a really big deal too. So not only is there no Buddha or Jesus or Muhammad, there's also no current leader. There's no pope. There's no Dalai Lama. Um, Essentially, you have what's called a guru, and a guru is your local priest or local rabbi, however you want to say that, and they have nobody above them who is dictating the faith to them and saying, this is what we believe or this is what we do. If the Pope says something, that's what the entire Catholic religion does. And every priest and bishop and archbishop and cardinal underneath the Pope, they all have to follow that guideline that is being set by the Pope. That doesn't exist in Buddhism. It stops at the priest, or it stops at the guru. And what that means is Hinduism is very different all over the place. So going back to one of my first comments when we started this video, it's hard. It's really hard to say Hinduism is this and explain it to you, because without this bureaucratic structure to give it this kind of cohesive message, Hinduism is practiced very differently in different parts of India. And then as Hindus have spread out, and you have pockets of Hindus living in the United States or in Europe or in Africa, um, they are doing things very unique in those places. And I guess you could say the same for Christianity. I mean, if we want to say, like, you have Mormons that do things a very unique way and Presbyterians that do things a very unique way. I mean, I guess that's true of all faith, that there's different groups that do things differently, but with no hierarchical structure at all. Like, even if you're Presbyterian, you don't necessarily believe in the Pope, but you recognize the Pope as an important religious figure, and you give credit to what the Pope says, or what the Pope says carries weight, maybe a better way to say that. That's not true when you talk about Hinduism. There's nobody at the top saying, hey, this is what you should be doing, or this is what you should consider doing if you're not a Catholic, but you're a Christian. This is something to think about. There's nothing like that. And so Hinduism is very, very different in different places. What that means is the individual has a lot of power in the faith. Again, going back to William James and individual religion, we kind of talk about every individual believes what they believe, and what's right for them is right for them. It's kind of tying together the idea of what's true for you is true for you with religion. That is really, really true in Hinduism, to the point where you can create your own gods. And Hinduism literally has millions of gods, because anybody who believes in the Hindu faith can create their own god. And when I had the lady come and do the presentation of Hinduism to the class, and she said that to the class, a very astute student raised their hand and said, "Does that mean that as a Christian, I'm also Hindu? Because I can just say that Jesus is my Hindu God that I worship and I follow, and that makes me Hindu?" And her answer was yes. You have the ability to name your own gods. And a lot of people in the Hindu faith pick a patron god for the family and put a shrine to that god in the house, so that that god watches over the family and protects the family. And you can literally create your own. If you don't like any of the current Hindu gods as your patron god for the family, you can create your own. So theoretically, you could be Hindu, take Jesus as your god, and create a shrine to Jesus in the house to watch over and protect you, and that would still be Hindu in nature. I'm not saying you're a Hindu if you do that. What I'm saying is that's a Hindu thing to do. That is in the nature of the Hindu to do something like that. So I thought that was a really interesting part of the Hindu faith too. It really is. I think, with everything I've said so far, I think this will make sense to you now. Hinduism is not this highly structured faith. It's very individual. It's very open to interpretation. It can be changed by individuals in the faith, and it's actually encouraged to a degree. So you have a lot of flexibility in Hinduism. And that's because it's this animistic faith that has been reborn over time, or recreated over time by individuals. And without that bureaucratic structure, without that original creator saying, this is how things are, it's just been very open to interpretation. And so if you talk to a Hindu that's living in Cleveland, and then you talk to a Hindu that's living in Mumbai, and then maybe you talk to a Hindu that's living in a rural part up in the north, um, you're going to find that they all have a very different understanding of what the faith is. And if you ask them some basic questions about Hinduism, they may give you completely different answers. And that's what makes Hinduism so hard to teach you guys, because I can't just say, like, here's the 10 Commandments, and here's the person that gave them, and this is what it means. It just doesn't work that way in Hinduism. So another interesting piece, just to tie that together, is the polytheistic versus monotheistic part of that. So we look at Hinduism and we say polytheistic, and you can right now Google Hindu gods and do an image search, and you can look at all the Hindu gods, and they have very unique looks. Oftentimes, it's a mixture of human features and animal features. Sometimes it's all animal features, but it's this mixture of features that you would never actually see in the real world, and each of them have different roles that they play. And so you would look at that and go, well, that's clearly like the old Greek mythology polytheism that we know about. And I don't know that you'd be wrong in that assessment, but Hindus would tell you you're wrong. They believe themselves to be monotheistic. And you might say, well, how is that possible? How am I looking at these gods? And how are you telling me that there's over 1 million Hindu gods? Because anybody can create their own god and have it be accepted in the Hindu faith. And how is that monotheistic? And the answer is, as I right below that, not centrally located, lacks bureaucratic structure. Right below that, you see head god is Brahman. All other gods are manifestations. So let me explain it to you this way. Christians believe in the Trinity. They believe that three gods are actually just one God, right? So the Holy Spirit, Jesus, and God, or Yahweh, if we want to be more specific about it, that they're all the same. The the basic idea there that that one God can manifest itself in multiple forms, in this case three, is the same in Hinduism. But in this case, Brahman actually manifests himself in millions of gods. So all gods are just Brahman. They're just different versions of Brahman. The same way that Jesus and the Holy Spirit are just a different version of God. So in that way, they believe themselves to be monotheistic. And a Hindu may look at a Christian and say, well, is it really just three in one? What about the Virgin Mother? Doesn't she play an important role in the faith? What about angels? What about demons? What about the devil? Is that not a supernatural being that has powers beyond humans, that is a negative force? How is that different from a Brahmin god that has um, a negative force associated with it? What about Saint Anthony, right? People pray to Saint Anthony when you lose your keys. How is that different from having a patron god to protect the family that is just a manifestation of Brahman? So it's pretty easy, I think, if you look at it that way, it's pretty easy to understand how they would call themselves monotheistic. Certainly, Christianity is monotheistic. I'm not arguing that. But are there other supernatural beings with powers beyond human powers? And the answer is yes, but we still call ourselves monotheistic. So why can't we accept that all gods in Hinduism are manifestations of Brahman, and therefore they are also monotheistic? So it's an interesting argument. It's Again, this is just for academics. I am certainly not saying that Christianity is polytheistic or trying to make an argument that Hindus are monotheistic. Right? That's up for you to decide, and you interpret this however you want to interpret this. I think the important thing is just to lay out how and why people come to these conclusions, and you decide for yourself, kind of like relativism, right? You decide for yourself what's true for you. Okay, let's go to the beliefs and practices. And again, I'm going to tie kind of the beliefs and practices with the social diffusion and manifestation. So we're going to kind of pull all of these things together to close out our Hinduism conversation. Okay, so some of this you've heard of, and some of this you may not have. The beliefs and practices are dharma, karma, reincarnation, and moksha. And this, by the way, is the Om, and we'll come back to the Om in just a second. But the Om is a symbol, and it's also a sound. You'll find that it's connected to meditation and yoga. So we're going to come back to the Om symbol because that ties into all of what we're talking about too. So start with Dharma. Dharma is morals and ethics. It's the shouldness. Remember, we talked about all religion has shouldness, what you should and should not do, what is ethically correct and morally correct. And Dharma is that. It's the why. Why are you? What is your decision, and why are you doing this? Do you have the right motivation and the right intention? And you generally want to have good dharma, which means you want to have character, you want to have ethics, you want to have morals, you want to do the right thing for the right reason, going back to philosophy. Remember, moral responsibility. Dharma is your moral responsibility. Okay, now, if you have good dharma, which means generally you make good moral decisions, then you will also have good karma. And karma is the way of the universe. Um, we tend to see karma as something that is a decision by the god or the gods. Like, I didn't hold this door open on somebody. I let the door drop on somebody who was carrying a bunch of stuff. And then later on, I tripped and I fell and I dropped something, right? And I know I'm using a lame example. You get what I mean here, right? You do something that is generally perceived to be a bad decision, and then something bad happens to you because of it. And that's not how Hindus see that. They see karma as um, the the positive and negative forces that exist in the universe. And so if you do things that are positive and are morally responsible, then you will draw on the positive energy of the universe and things will be better for you generally. It's not like one event will lead directly to the other. Um, the same is true if you have bad dharma or bad morality. So if your decisions are not morally sound, if your motivations are not morally sound, then you're going to attract the negative forces of the universe, and generally life will be tougher for you or more difficult for you. Again, it's not a single incident will lead to another incident type thing. That is more of a Western understanding of karma. Now, I said universe, and I'm going to continue to say universe for the next couple of minutes here because that's the best way I can describe it to you. But when I say universe, I don't mean from a scientific perspective. When I say universe, I mean from a spiritual perspective. So, universe means all that is, all that exists. And if you think back to these animistic religions that we're talking about, they looked up at the sky and they kind of started referring to that as the heavens, or a modern version of that would be the heavens or the gods. It seemed like the skies were alive at night with spirits. And so when they say universe, they mean all that is and all that exists. They don't necessarily mean stars and planets and the universe from a scientific perspective. So remember that when I say universe, I'm talking spiritual universe, not scientific or actual universe. Okay. If you have good dharma and you have good karma, then when you die, you will be reincarnated up the chain. And that's the idea in Hinduism. You want to be reborn into the next religion. Or sorry, reborn into the next the next link up the chain in life. And it starts as an animal, and that's why Hindus are vegan and they don't eat animals and they try not to harm animals in any way because they believe that every animal is a potential human life. And if you kill that animal, then you prevent them from moving up the chain because they weren't able to fulfill the goal or fulfill their dharma and their karma for that life, and they have to go back and do it over again. So in Hinduism, you don't go backwards ever. So once you move up the chain, and there's like 300 some animals that you're reincarnated as until you reach the human level. If you do not have a great karma and dharma in one particular point, you don't go back and you don't go back to the beginning. You just get to do it over again. And you continue to be the same animal over and over again until you do what you're supposed to do at that level. And then you get to go to the next level, all the way up to a human. And you hear that cows are sacred in Hinduism. That's not necessarily true. It kind of is. But the last animal before you become a human is a Brahma bull. So that is what is sacred in Hinduism, is a Brahma bull, because they are the last of the animal links. And Brahma bulls, when they die, if the soul and the spirit of the bull is doing what it's supposed to do, becomes a human. And so they're revered. Brahma bulls are revered in Hinduism, and they're awesome animals, by the way. If you look them up, they're crazy. I actually saw a Brahma bull in person at a park that I took my kids to when they were young. One of those, drive your car through and feed the animal parks, and they had Brahma bulls, and they're pretty awesome animals, very unique looking. Okay, so that is the reincarnation piece. Now, when you hit the human level of reincarnation, this is where we're going to pull in the caste system. So we're going to jump down here to social manifestation, talk about caste system for a minute. When you're reincarnated to the human level, you then need to have good dharma and karma to move up that level, and that's called the caste system. That has been dissolved by the government, and rightfully so. What the caste system essentially says, and you got to remember that India is a democracy, so they're the largest democracy in the world numbers wise, and so it's important that they protect humans and individual rights and things like that. And essentially, what the caste system says is, if you're born as a farmer, then you have no choice but to be a farmer or another career or lifestyle within that range. But a farmer can't become a doctor or a lawyer, so you're stuck in a class, which doesn't really fit with democracy, right? The idea of democracy is that if you want to, you can work hard and get a good education or have inspiration and a great idea, and you can move up the level in your lifetime. You're not stuck as lower class or middle class your whole life. You have the opportunity to move classes. And so, in a democracy such as India, they got rid of that caste system, but that doesn't mean it's gone. It doesn't mean people have stopped believing that. So yeah, if you're born into a certain caste in India or a certain social class in India, it's very hard. Even though legally they nobody can stop you, it's very hard to get out of that. So yeah, if you're born a farmer and you try to go to law school, there's a lot of people that will just block that path in any way that they can because they don't believe you should be there. It's kind of like civil rights in the South, right? I mean, we got rid of segregation and Jim Crow laws in the 1960s. But did that stop racism? Did it stop people from trying to prevent African Americans from gaining positions of power or taking on certain career paths? And the answer is no. It took generations, decades, to fight for additional rights in how people believe and how they think. Right? The government is not going to discriminate anymore, but that doesn't mean people change their minds. And it's kind of the same with the caste system. The government doesn't discriminate anymore; it doesn't force it anymore, but people haven't changed their minds. And that's why you'll find a lot of people will leave. A lot of Indians will leave India if they're in a lower caste because they find so many roadblocks to their career path they want, and so they leave and they go somewhere where those roadblocks don't exist. So anyway, that kind of gives you an idea of reincarnation. Okay, what you want to do if you're Hindu is be reincarnated all the way to the top of the human chain, which means that you are a monk. So you live a life of solitude, where your days are spent with prayer and yoga and meditation and kind of away from society. That's the very top. If everything goes well, you reach moksha. So the ultimate goal of Hinduism is to break the cycle of reincarnation. The idea here is that reincarnation is putting you back into the human condition, and the general human condition is suffering. That there's a lot of pain and suffering in life. There's a lot of great things too, but it comes with a lot of pain and suffering. When you reach moksha, all the pain and suffering goes away, and you become one with the universe. You become one with the Brahman. You essentially become, as it's explained to me, part of all that is. So reaching moksha is not a place. It's not heaven. It's not where you go to reunite with past relatives and family members and wear all white and hang out in the clouds for all of eternity with no pain and suffering. It's not like that. And that may not be your version of heaven. I'm just kind of drawing from like a typical version of heaven. Yours may be very different than that. But the point is, when you reach moksha, you cease to exist. You break the cycle of pain and suffering. You become one with the Brahman and one with the universe, and you just become part of what is. So you're not your soul is released, so to speak, but you're not remembering your previous life. You're not living with people in a place that's kind of clean and sanitized, and you're not reconnecting necessarily with old relatives. You're just all that is. You're part of all that is. So it's a very different understanding of life, or of the afterlife, I should say. So anyway, there's your dharma, karma, reincarnation, and moksha, and all of them are interrelated. Your morals lead to how the universe impacts you, and how all of this works together means you're reincarnated up the chain. And as you're reincarnated all the way up the chain, you reach the pure enlightenment, the becoming one with the universe. Okay, now if we jump down here, yoga and meditation are a huge part of this. This is a form of prayer, and we have kind of stolen that in the West because we find other benefits in yoga and meditation. But if you're Hindu, this is how you pray. This is how you relax, and this is how you kind of connect with the Brahman. So, yoga is stretching and moving the body into different positions that are relaxing. Meditation is breathing and calming your body, and um, releasing some of the pain and the suffering and the daily tension in your life, letting all of that go for a short time, and just entering into a state of relaxation, where you're blocking all of that out. And essentially, meditation is trying to access moksha, and this state of being where you have nothing pulling at you, and you're just relaxed. So we use this in the West. Yoga obviously is used by athletes, or by people who want to stay in shape. It's great for muscles. It's great for core. It's great for strength. Great for stretching and pliability. So you find that yoga is something that everybody does, but especially athletes or people that are athletic do, because of the benefits of that to the body. Meditation is more the mind. People that have anxiety or depression, or generally people that just live stressful lives and need to find relaxation once in a while, use meditation to relax and work on their breathing, and just kind of center themselves. So we have found medical benefits to yoga and meditation, where these are more spiritual, and bring spiritual benefits to people in Hinduism. Okay, as far as the diffusion, it has generally stayed home. And then, so it's in Southeast Asia, or it's in South Asia. It's essentially in India and some surrounding countries, but really it's people that are Indian descent that are Hindu for the most part. You do find some Americans that will convert to Hinduism, but it's really, really rare. They don't encourage or discourage um, converts. So as we were talking yesterday with like universalizing versus ethnic, it is an ethnic faith, but they're not like people that are Zoroastrists or Jewish people, where you kind of don't really want converts. You want people to be born into the faith, and unless you're going to marry into a family and convert for marriage, other than that, there's really no reason to convert. Hinduism is fine with converts, but they don't actively seek converts. They don't. It's not part of the faith to go out and convert people. So, um, the last thing that I'm going to say, and then I'll talk about Sikhism. But the last thing I'm going to say is kind of connect the Om symbol. So Om, this is the symbol for it, and then it's also a sound. You'll see that people that meditate and do yoga, that they'll go Om. And monks, as they do it, will kind of repeat that over and over again. Om is when you say Om, or you are part of that process, you're accessing Brahman inside of you. So Om and this symbol and you saying it is actually you recognizing and accessing Brahman, and the God that is the one and only God in the Hindu faith. So Om actually has a sound and a name, and it is Brahman inside of all of us. And the argument that Hindus would make is that your soul is Brahman inside of you. And so we all have God inside of us if we're Hindu. That's the idea there. And what you're trying to do in your lifetime, and Om is helping you recognize and meet this goal, what you're trying to do is move up this social ladder so that you can eventually reach moksha and reunite Brahman inside of you with the Brahman that is the universe, and part of all that is. So that's the ultimate goal, is to release your Om, or release the Brahman inside of you back to the universe. Okay, Sikhism is a splinter religion, and of course, the next group that we talk about is Buddhism. That's a splinter religion too. But Sikhism is a splinter religion, and Sikhism is a more modern version. It's about 300 years old. I would ask that you go watch this video. I found from watching the video yesterday that I created for you guys. I went and watched it afterwards to make sure that the YouTube video that I showed you worked, and it did on the screen, but you couldn't hear anything. There's actually a little bit of sound and a little bit of talking in that YouTube video I showed you yesterday. It didn't come through. So I am not going to be able to show you these videos as part of the Screencastify presentation. I'm going to ask that you go do that on your own. So right now, if you could, after I'm done talking here, pause this, go to my website, go to Forms and Docs, scroll about halfway down, click on the religion PowerPoint, open it up to this slide, and then you can click on this Sikhism link right here. And you can watch a video. It's, I don't know, 5 minutes or something. It's not a long video, but it'll explain a little bit more about Sikhism. But essentially, you had a guru. Remember, we said that Hinduism is very different all over the place based on the region that you live in and the people and what they believe in that area. So there was a guru that came along right around 1700, was very influential, and he created his own version of Hinduism that became known as Sikhism. He then passed on his teachings to another person, and that person to another person, and so on and so forth. And so there ended up being the 10 gurus of Sikhism. There were 10 in a row that all took on kind of the leadership of this new version of Hinduism called Sikhism, which is very much the same as Hinduism with some differences, right? Kind of the same way we would say like Buddhism is similar to Hinduism, but has some differences. Christianity is similar to Judaism, but has some differences. Same type of thing. And at the end of the line of 10 gurus, the 10th guru said, we are going to break the chain of human leaders, and we are now going to turn to the sacred text as the final guru or the final leader of the faith. And so Sikhs today do not follow a specific guru. They follow the teachings of all the gurus, which are held in the sacred text. So if you watch the video, you'll get a little bit on some of the beliefs and practices of Sikhism. And then you'll also hear a couple interviews with a few Sikhs. And there's a Sikh community in the United States that they go to, and they talk to some people living in the U.S. about the faith. So it's like I said, it's like a quick video, 5 minutes, pretty good to give you an understanding of Sikhism. One of the keys, things that you should understand going into this, Sikhism has people wearing certain things, and so women have the head cover, and men wear their hair up in a head cover as well, and so they have a very distinct look. Sikhs do. And what that leads to is a lot of misunderstanding. A lot of people see somebody who is Sikh and think that they are Muslim because the way that the Sikhs dress compared to how Muslims dress is somewhat similar from an American perspective. Let me qualify that and say from an American perspective, not if you're in other parts of the world. But we tend to see the skin tone and the dress and mistake people who are Sikh for people that are Muslim. I'm willing to bet that you probably have seen and know some people in this area, in the Cleveland area, that are Sikh, and may have even mistaken them for being Muslim. So anyway, you'll see a little bit more of that in the video as well. Okay. And here is your Hindu temple. One of the things that we talk about is kind of the nature part of it, how Hindus really love animals, and that's because of the idea of reincarnation and the idea that an animal is a potential human life. That leads to an overall connection to nature. And you're going to find that that is a common theme in Eastern religion. There is a really, really strong connection to nature, where, Mother Nature, or the old animistic idea that God is in nature, kind of still exists within a lot of these Eastern religions. And so it's a pretty big deal to try and create Hindu temples that are open air, where gods are actually carved into rock, or that there's just an open air temple where you can go and you can practice and you can be part of nature. It's tucked away from big city life, and it's an area where you can go to be calm. And it kind of fits with like the yoga meditation centering yourself ideas where being at one with nature can help you do those things. I had a kid in class many years ago who had an older sister who married a Hindu, an Indian Hindu, and they actually went back to India for the wedding. And he was able to go to that wedding, and he said it was an open air temple, and he said it was amazing. The scenery and the way that the gods are carved into rock, and everything associated with it is just really neat. Totally different. We most of our Western faith is inside, and everything is ornate. This is different. Everything is outside, and everything is more natural. They try and create temples in natural settings. So anyway, that gives you another kind of piece of Hinduism. That's it for Hinduism. Like I said, I don't know that I did the religion justice. I did the best I could based on what I know. But I would encourage you, if what you heard sounded interesting to you, please explore a little bit more on your own. And the best way to do that is to talk to somebody who's Hindu. If you have access to that and can talk to somebody who's Hindu about what they think or what they believe, that's better than any video or any book or any instructor that never practiced Hinduism himself. Okay. With that, we're going to jump into Buddhism. And I know that this is running a little long, so I think I'm going to stop after Buddhism. And we will not do Confucianism and Taoism today. We'll save that for the next video. Okay, so Buddhism has a lot of the same type ideas of Hinduism, so I don't know that we'll spend as much time on this. You also see two videos here, Buddhism and then Shintoism. So I'd ask you to please, again, go to my website and watch these videos at the end of the presentation here. This Buddhism video is actually both Hinduism and Buddhism, so it connects what I was just talking about with what I'm about to talk about, so it does both. And then Shintoism, this video here talks about how Buddhism and animistic faith in Japan kind of came together and created what we know as Shintoism in Japan today. So either one of these are very long videos. All of these are short clips. I can't remember exactly, but there should be in the 5-minute neighborhood each. Okay, so about 2,500 years ago, this is 500 years before Jesus, if we want to help place it on a Western timeline. There was a splintering off of Hinduism, and Buddhism is created. Buddhism is actually created by a specific person right here, Siddhartha. So Siddhartha is who we call the Buddha. And Siddhartha came from a rich royal family. He was born into all the lavish riches and lifestyles of the day in what is today Nepal. So he isn't actually not in India. He is close by in Nepal. And back then, you had kingdoms throughout the area, and so his father was the king of that particular area. So he had a kingdom, and he lived in a castle. And when he's born, the local guru, Hindu guru, comes in, and as tradition, they give a prediction to the family, or maybe a premonition might be a better way to say it, of who the new child is going to be, and what the life of the child is going to be. So this guru comes in and meets baby Siddhartha and tells the king that he is destined to be a great religious leader. And the father, the king, does not want to hear that. What he wants to hear is he's going to be a great king or a great leader, great ruler. So he sets out to prevent Siddhartha from becoming a religious leader. And he figures the best way to do this is to raise him with all of the spoils that rich people get to enjoy. And if he lives this life of lavish parties and anything that he wants, he won't want to be a religious leader. He'll want to continue to live this lavish, rich lifestyle. And so Siddhartha is banned from ever leaving the castle. He never goes out. He is not given much of a religious background. He's raised in a Hindu family, so there's a little bit, but he's not in this strong religious setting. And from all accounts, he is doted upon. He has people taking care of him and all of his needs, huge meals all the time, parties all the time. He's just living his best life. And as he approaches 18, he starts to grow weary of this life. He doesn't like the idea that he can't go beyond the walls and he doesn't know what's out there in the world. He goes a little stir crazy and he feels like he's being sheltered and protected. And as most of you probably understand, he reaches a point where he wants to break out and go out on his own and figure some things out about the world. It's generally perceived that he was around 18. So he sneaks out. He waits till everybody goes to bed and he gets past the guards, dresses as a commoner, and sneaks out of the castle. And when this happens and he goes out into, the town, he sees a lot of pain and suffering. And this is shocking to him because he's only lived this great life. He's only known all of these wonderful things. And he sees poor people. He sees people that are hungry, people that don't have enough food, don't have a job, don't have any place to sleep. He sees all sorts of pain and suffering. And he starts to question why he gets to live this life of joy and why others live this life of sorrow. And he doesn't want it anymore. He says, this is not who I want to be and not what I want to do. I don't want to be rich. I don't want to live this life. And he essentially runs away and he starts to travel on his own to figure things out. And as he's going around and kind of understanding the human condition, he finally stops and says, okay, now that I have an understanding of the world as it really exists, not the one that I was given as a child, but the real world, time for me to figure some things out. And believe it or not, he actually stops in a place called Bogaya, India, under a bo tree. And you'll oftentimes see the image. It's a shorter, bushier kind of, and so you'll oftentimes it's kind of has that round, traditional tree type look. Not tall though; it's a shorter tree. And he sits and he meditates under this tree for a long time, days and days and days and days. Doesn't eat, and gets to the point where he is in poor health, trying to figure this out. And he won't leave until he figures out what he needs to do to make the world a better place. So in this, he is becoming what the Hindu prophet said he would become, and that is a great religious leader, because he's trying to help the world, trying to help people figure out how to live a better life so that he doesn't have or eliminates some of the pain and suffering in the world. And one thing of note here, when you see a Buddha, uh, it is usually not Siddhartha. There are lots of Buddhas out there. Buddha is like saying priest, or it's a title. Um, it's like saying maybe not priest. It's probably more like saying cardinal or something along those lines. Buddhas are pretty high up there, but there's different kinds of Buddhas. He is the Buddha, which means like the one, the Buddha, the enlightened one. He is very skinny. So when you see an image of the Buddha that is very, very skinny, that is probably Siddhartha, the main Buddha. The one that we see is a little bit bigger. So we think of this Buddha with this big belly. We actually sometimes refer to people with a big belly as Buddha. That Buddha is one that is supposed to bring joy and happiness, and so it's a different kind of Buddha. And we tend to in the West be connected to that Buddha that brings joy and happiness. And you'll find that people put that Buddha around in places because it's supposed to be a good omen and good luck and bring joy and happiness. So Siddhartha is the skinny Buddha because he's oftentimes depicted as the one that's sitting under the tree and meditating for a long time without eating, to the point where he almost died from malnourishment. That's how long he was under that tree. So what he comes up with is that religion and salvation is for everybody, which again is different. This kind of goes back to the way that we saw things during the time of Jesus and before that, and that is that if you're rich and you're powerful, that's because God is all powerful and all knowing and controls everything, and He wants you to be rich and powerful. Remember the divine right of kings. The kings ruled by the hand of God because God controls everything, and if this person is the king, it's because God wants it, and God has looked favorably on this person and this family. And that's the same general belief that was in Hinduism at the time period. And Siddhartha comes along and says, no, that's not true. Salvation is for everybody. Anybody can reach enlightenment. And the way to reach enlightenment is to eliminate pain and suffering in the world. Well, how do you eliminate pain and suffering in the world? And I don't know that it can be eliminated. I don't know that Siddhartha thought it could be eliminated, but it can certainly be mitigated. And the way to control pain and suffering is to eliminate greed and craving and desire. So his meditation told him that greed leads to unhappiness, because if you're greedy, you're never happy. You always want more. Craving, wanting, seeing somebody else get something nice and wanting that thing that they have, that leads to unhappiness. And if you want to be happy in this world, you can't crave something. You can't be greedy and want it all. You can't desire things that you can't have. So if you can eliminate greed and craving and desire, then you can live a better life, a happier life, and eliminate some of the pain and suffering. He said the only way to really be a good person is to be honest all the time. And remember, he's not saying don't lie. He's saying be honest. Those are two different things. So complete honesty and never hurt another animal or never hurt another person. So all that is here under beliefs, the power, the bullet point under or about beliefs. So this is the way to happiness. And again, you're going to find, as I write right here, Buddhism, like Hinduism, is not necessarily a religion. I mean, it is, but we would look at it more as a way of life. These are the things that you should do in your life to be happy, to live a good life, and to find your way to the afterlife you desire. So as we jump up to the top here, the Dharma, the karma, the reincarnation, it's all the same, right? Because Buddhism came from Hinduism, and so it adopted all of that. Nirvana replaces moksha. Moksha is becoming one with the Brahman, becoming part of all that is. Nirvana is a little bit different, because to reach nirvana, you have to eliminate the greed and the craving and the desire and live honestly and never hurt another animal or person. And one of the big changes with nirvana is that anybody can reach nirvana. You don't have to be a priest. Hinduism had taught that you have to go through the human reincarnation chain and be a priest before you can reach moksha. Buddha said that anybody can reach nirvana, right? Right here. Anyone can achieve salvation. So the poorest of the poor can reach nirvana. And nirvana, again, is being released of pain and suffering. So in that way, it's like moksha. But he's saying that you can do that now. Right now, anybody living on earth can reach nirvana following this path, right? And he actually called it the eightfold path, and he came up with specific things that you can do to help you achieve salvation. And you'll notice here, this is called the wheel, Buddhist wheel, sometimes known as the Dharma wheel. And there are 8 spokes, one for each of the eightfold path. And these are the things that you should do. This gets to the shouldness of the faith. These are the things that you should do to reach salvation or to reach nirvana. And again, that's becoming one with the universe, but doing it in a way where you eliminate pain and suffering. Okay, it's a Buddhist would probably even argue that I shouldn't be saying all of this to you because um, teaching Buddhism is supposed to be a conversation. It shouldn't be me telling you the story of Siddhartha and the connections that it has to Hinduism and about how you reach nirvana. If you were to say to a Buddhist, "Hey, tell me about the Buddhist faith," the standard response would be, "Let's sit and have tea," as I write right here. Let's sit and have tea. And the idea of that is, well, I'm not going to tell you about the Buddhist faith. Let's have a conversation. You tell me what you think. I'll tell you what I think. If I say something that makes sense, great, go with it. And if I don't say anything that makes sense to you, then keep searching and figure it out for yourself. So that type of openness is pretty appealing in today's day and age. And I said in the last slide that Buddhism is the number one conversion faith in the world today, that more people are leaving their religion and converting to Buddhism than any other faith. For example, you don't see as many people, let's say, leaving Judaism and becoming Christian or something like that. But you do find a lot of people that find Buddhism appealing. And I think one of the reasons why is because the Dalai Lama is so appealing, as we've talked about in the past. He's just an interesting person, and his message is so universal and so appealing that I think that's a reason why. He's a great spokesperson for Buddhism. But I also think it's this idea that it's very individual. And I know it's the third time I'm referencing William James. But back to the idea of personal religion. Sit and have tea. Let's talk about this. Maybe I say something that makes sense to you. Maybe I can help you. Maybe I can't. I don't know, but let's try. And that's the approach that you take, as opposed to saying, well, I have all the answers. Here they are. This is what you have to do. This is what you should do. Follow this path, blah, blah, blah. Buddhism isn't really like that. It's much more open, and it's take what you need to make yourself a better person and reach enlightenment. Do what you have to do to help yourself. And again, that is the more of a way of a life than a religion, right? And that's what Buddha tried to do, is help people. That's what it's about, helping people, giving them a path, and not necessarily telling them what they have to do, but helping them recognize for themselves what they need. And that's kind of the basis of religion. Okay. As far as diffusion is concerned, confusion is discerned. It's spread throughout all of Asia, really. I mean, it's strong in Tibet and China, the Koreas, Japan, Vietnam, Indonesia, so Southeast Asia, into Japan. As we see there with Shintoism, you got that mixture of Buddhism and ancestor worship. But it's really strong in Asia. But you are finding a fair number of Buddhists in Europe and in North and South America as well, just because Buddhism seems to fit with a more modern understanding of faith, and it can be immensely helpful to people that are in a tough situation. And I think that's a big reason why people are kind of drawn to that. Okay, so in Shintoism, as Buddhism came in, speaking of the assignment that you guys are probably doing as I speak here, of diffusion of religion and what it looks like, what happened when Buddhism hit Japan with Shintoism is really interesting, because instead of having a lot of uh, conflict, if you look at the West, there's been a lot of conflict between the Jewish faith and the Christian faith and the Muslim faith. You have all sorts of wars and conflict and death and destruction associated with it. Even with the old polytheistic faith, you look at Vikings and things like that, and they're fighting under the polytheistic gods of the Norse, and they're fighting against the Christian communities that are in Southern Europe. So there's just a lot of conflict when it comes to Europeans and Western faith. There's a little less of that. There's still conflict, and there's still war based on religion in Asia, but there's a little less of that. And Shintoism, how that developed in Japan is a great example of that, where Buddhism came in and the animistic customs that were there with Shintoism mixed with the new concepts of Buddhism. And now, when you say Shinto in Japan, most people will associate that with both animistic and Buddhist traditions and customs. And so that video will kind of help explain some of that to you. But it's Shintoism, just to clarify, is in Japan. It's only in Japan. If you are Japanese, you are Shinto. If you are Shinto, you are Japanese. So that is another ethnic faith. You don't find people converting to Shintoism. But if you could watch that video, and that'll give you a little wrap up on that. Okay, and finally, just to give you an idea here, I know we've been talking about diffusion. So here's Hinduism, starting in the Indus Valley and spreading through nearby countries. And here's Buddhism, starting in Nepal, right outside of India, and of course, spreading throughout Asia for the most part. Okay, in Japan, Buddhism is mixed with Shintoism, which originated in Japan. This is a Buddhist Shinto shrine in Kyoto. So that is actually a Shinto shrine, but you'll find that Buddhist practices still occur at this particular shrine. Okay, and I am going to stop there. I know that's a lot for today. I appreciate you guys staying with me. If you have questions, we can cover those at an upcoming Zoom meeting. There is no activity right now. The activity actually comes after Taoism and after Confucianism. So nothing to do right now as far as work is concerned, but I am going to have you guys do a assignment after we study the Chinese traditional religions of the Yellow River Valley. All right, everybody, stay cool, stay healthy, and we will see you soon, either on a Zoom session or with another video. Okay, take care, everybody.